So I just got back from lodge meeting tonight, and one of the brothers stood up and he shared an educational piece that it really stuck with me. He wasn't talking about history or ancient rituals. He was talking about the guys sitting in that very room. Specifically, he was talking about the quiet, often invisible battle for men's mental health. It's the kind of thing we usually gloss over with a joke or, some light banter at a bar or something like that. But when you look at the raw data, the reality is nothing short of grim. The numbers aren't just statistics, they're a siren. According to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, men in the United States die by suicide nearly 4 times more often than women. And it's about the same in Canada. It's a staggering gap. We are essentially vanishing at a rate that should be headline news every single day. Globally, the World Health Organization has noted that while women are more frequently diagnosed with depression, men are significantly more likely to engage in externalizing behaviors. Think substance abuse, explosive anger, or total social withdrawal. We've even been conditioned not to weep, so we wither or we blow up instead. And it isn't just the extreme cases. We're currently navigating what researchers call a loneliness epidemic. A 2022 survey from the American Psychological Association found that a massive 61% of young men report feeling lonely frequently or all the time. To put that into perspective, health experts have pointed out that chronic isolation is as damaging to your physical health as smoking 15 cigarettes a day. Yeah, we are falling behind in education, we are stagnating in our careers, and we are quite literally dying in the shadows because we've been told that being a man means keeping your mouth shut while the ship goes down. The talk at lodge tonight was the reminder. We are in a crisis of mental isolation. We have failed to master ourselves, and that failure is showing up in our bank accounts, our families, and our heads. Today, I want to talk about how we start to win that ground back by using 5 specific pillars of self-mastery. We're starting with the heavy hitter, purpose. Think of it as the anchor that keeps you from being swept away when life gets turbulent. Right now, a lot of guys are just drifting. And I don't mean, being bored. It's actually dangerous for your mental health. When you're aimless, you're vulnerable. You're susceptible to every social media trend, every external opinion, and every midlife crisis that comes knocking because you don't have a center. In clinical psychology, there's a powerful concept called behavioral activation. It's essentially the idea that doing things that align with your values actually shifts your brain chemistry. When you lack purpose, your brain doesn't just sit idle, it begins to eat itself. You start asking the value question. If I'm not my job title and I'm not my bank balance, then who exactly am I? The problem is that many of us have outsourced our mission to the highest bidder. We chase promotions we don't want, to buy things we don't need, to impress people who don't even like us. That isn't a mission, that's a treadmill. Viktor Frankl, a psychiatrist who survived the Holocaust, wrote something essential in Man's Search for Meaning. He argued that our primary drive as humans isn't pleasure or power, but the discovery and pursuit of meaning. He saw it firsthand in the concentration camps. The men who had a why, a child to see again, a legacy to finish, a family to return to, those were the men who found the mental resilience to survive the unsurvivable. Your purpose doesn't have to be some grand, world-saving disruptor mission. It's often much closer to home. It might be being the most reliable person in your office or the father who actually knows what's going on in his kid's life. It's about creating harmony where your growth, your people, and your work aren't fighting each other. When you have a mission, no becomes a lot easier to say. You stop scrolling because you have something better to build. You stop drifting because you finally have a North Star. Pillar number 2 is the intellect. Now, don't roll your eyes. This isn't a university lecture. When I talk about intellect, I'm not talking about, collecting degrees like they're Pokemon cards. I'm talking about building a filter. We live in an age of information overload. But more data doesn't equal more wisdom. In fact, if you aren't careful, your mind becomes a dumping ground for other people's agendas. I learned this the hard way back in Jamaica. I was fresh out of high school working at the Ministry of Education, and I met this smooth talking guy who was full of business ideas. He convinced me he needed my original certificates, my birth certificate, my high school diploma, to use as inspiration for some kind of business project. I was naive. I handed them over and the guy vanished. He was out there trying to build a new life using my identity. That was a brutal $0 in the bank lesson in the lack of critical thinking. The reality is that we are in an information war. A study from the Stanford Graduate School of Education found that even digital natives, young people who grew up with the internet, even those persons struggle immensely to tell the difference between a credible news story and a sponsored ad. If they're struggling, where does that leave the rest of us? If you aren't actively training your brain to question assumptions and demand evidence, you are being programmed. True intellect is about being a lifelong learner, not to pass an exam, but to keep your mind agile. I remember years ago, I had a student by the name of Ozzy. She came back to university at 70 because she was tired of just staying home and watching Judge Judy, and she wanted to engage with the world. She was in a class with 20-something-year-olds, but that didn't faze her one bit. That is mental fortitude. Intellect is your armor. It's what allows you to evaluate an investment, a political claim, or a health fad without being swayed by the loudest voice in the room. It's the ability to step out of your echo chamber and realize that your perspective is limited. If you want to master yourself, you have to start by taking back control of your own narrative. Pillar number 3, resilience and strength. Let's talk about the body. We've all heard that your body is a temple, but for a lot of us, it feels more like a fixer-upper that's been neglected for over a decade. Physical strength is often the first thing people think of when they hear masculinity, but I want to reframe it. Building your body isn't just about vanity or fitting into a nice t-shirt. It's about creating a physiological foundation for your own mental health. There's a direct biological link between physical activity and your psychological state. A massive 2023 study published in the British Journal of Sports Medicine found that physical activity is 1.5 times more effective at reducing symptoms of depression and anxiety than counseling or leading medications. Squats and deadlifts. Those things aren't just for muscle, they're for your mood as well. When you train, you aren't just building a bicep, you're training your brain to handle stress, to endure discomfort, and to finish what you started. But resilience is more than just sheer brawn. It's about a man's good name. Yeah, it's integrity. All right, you can bench 300 pounds. But if your character is shaky, you're still a weak man. Resilience of character is what allows you to own your mistakes instead of deflecting them. It's what stops you from, cutting corners when nobody is watching. Abraham Lincoln wasn't called Honest Abe because it sounded catchy. He earned that reputation through 1,000 small daily decisions to stand by his principles, even when it cost him. In life, you're going to face what I call the metaphorical dump truck of problems. Your business might fail, a relationship might crumble, or you might get a health scare that knocks the wind out of you. Resilience is the ability to stand up, dust yourself off, and say, what's next? It's the mindset of somebody like Nelson Mandela, who spent 27 years in a cell and emerged not with a desire for revenge, but with a mission for reconciliation. He famously said, I never lose. I either win or learn. If you want to master yourself, You have to build a body that can move and a character that won't break. Pillar number 4 is intimacy. Growing up in Jamaica, I was surrounded by the echoes of macho culture. It's a script we're all familiar with. Men are the providers, the protectors, the silent types who don't show weakness. But that macho facade is usually just a mask. And wearing a mask for decades is exhausting. It's also a death sentence for your mental health. When I talk about intimacy, I'm not just talking about romance, though, that's certainly a part of it. I'm talking about the courage to be known. We've been told that vulnerability is the opposite of strength. But in reality, vulnerability is the requirement for connection. If you can't be honest about your fears, your hopes, or your struggles, you are living in a self-imposed solitary confinement. The data on this is striking. According to research published in the Journal of Behavioral Addictions, a growing number of men are choosing virtual escapes, like or excessive gaming. And they're choosing it over real world intimacy because the digital version is safer. There's a guy out there right now getting ready to go on a date with his AI girlfriend. Men like these feel their virtual escape doesn't require the messy, scary work of being vulnerable. But that safety is a trap. It leads to a type of emotional malnutrition that starves your soul. We need to reframe empathy. It's not a soft trait, it's a high level skill. It's the ability to pause your own story and actually understand someone else's. That's what makes you a better father, a better partner, and a better leader. Think about Nelson Mandela again. His power didn't come from a confident swagger. It came from a deep capacity for empathy. He chose reconciliation over revenge because he understood the human heart. And here's the most manly thing you can do. Seek support. We treat asking for help like it's a concession of defeat, but it's actually a tactical move. If you were a professional athlete, you'd have a coach. If you were a CEO, you'd have a board of directors. Why do we think we should navigate the complexities of life without a team? True strength isn't about silently enduring a load that's too heavy. It's about having the character to say, I need some help here. That isn't weakness. That is self-mastery. Pillar number 5 is community. No man is an island. We've all heard that cliche. But we're living in an era that treats isolation like a lifestyle choice. We call it independence, or we hide in our man caves. But for too many of us, that cave has become a prison. We are trading real-world brothers for digital pixels, and we're paying for it with our sanity. The McKinsey & Company Women in the Workplace report recently highlighted a troubling shift. While women are aggressively building professional networks and mentorship programs, men are stagnating. We've largely lost the informal clubs of the past, but we haven't built anything to replace them. We're working in silos, eating lunch at our desks, and wondering why we feel like we're grinding our gears in a void. The Harvard Study of Adult Development, one of the longest running studies on human happiness ever conducted, found a very clear answer to what makes a good life. It wasn't your salary, or your job title, or your IQ. It was the quality of your relationships, period, full stop. People who were more socially connected to family, friends, and community were not only happier and lived longer, but they stayed cognitively sharp for much longer than those who were isolated. Community isn't just about having people to grab a beer with. It's about finding your tribe, a group that actually holds you accountable and knows your story. You need people who see you, not your LinkedIn profile, nor your Instagram feed, but you. If you're spending 40 hours a week gaming or scrolling, you aren't unwinding, you are withdrawing. Real connection takes effort. It takes showing up when you'd rather stay on the couch. But your success, your resilience, and your mental health aren't individual achievements. They're the results of the people you share the journey with. Don't be a lone wolf. The lone wolf is usually the first one to freeze. Find your pack. All right, so we've covered a lot of ground today. From finding your why to lifting heavy things and learning how to actually talk to people you love. But talking about this stuff is the easy part. Doing it, that's the war. There will never be a perfect moment to start mastering yourself. The perfect moment was yesterday. The next best moment is right now. As I mentioned at the start, I was lucky enough to find a group that valued these pillars. When I joined Freemasonry, I realized I'd stumbled into an organization that had been telling men to work on these exact 5 things for hundreds of years. Now, look, I'm not saying you must join the Masons. I'm not here to recruit you, but I'm telling you that if you're a guy out there feeling isolated, adrift, and just overall lacking purpose, you need to find a group of sensible men who can help guide you. Whether it's the men's group at your church, a community service club, or hey, the local lodge down the street, just find your pack. Get out of the cave. Stop trying to navigate the most complex era in human history on your own. It's not working for you, and it's not working for the people who depend on you. The world needs men who are strong in body, sharp in mind, and deep in spirit. It needs men who are significant because of what they give, not what they take. So, step into the discomfort. Choose growth. Master yourself. This is the Brotherly Love Podcast. Let's get to work.